some shamanic work together and some meditative work together, working on different things within myself, which, by the way, is a pretty amazing process. Yes. But I enjoyed the process. I've been doing a lot of work, as you know, and this is really, really sort of helps me level up a little bit on my processes. Right. So tell my listeners who you are, kind of where you came from, because without me saying it, I'd rather have them hear from you.
Okay, well, thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, you're welcome, of course.
I'm a shamanic practitioner of many generations in my lineage, and I'm also a lifestyle coach. And what I like to do for my clients is provide them with shamanic services, but also provide a psychological and emotional support system to go along with that. And I also teach meditation at a group scale or personal, one-on-one.
What kinds of reasons why people might hire you? Aside from, forget about me for a second, but what kinds of reasons might somebody hire you to do some of this work? Like what kinds of things might be going on in their life that might signal to them to do this work? Because I think a lot of people don't do this work, and they should. But sometimes I think they don't know when they should or why they should.
Well, I think most of us as human beings go through the same themes in life that put us in a situation where we reach rock bottom. So that could be any thematics from unresolved trauma, divorce, loss of a loved one, adversity, financial issues. Anything has its roots in unresolved issues. And I work a lot with the subconscious mind. So because as we've spoken about before, the subconscious mind has a very firm grip on the way that we make decisions in life, and also we've talked about self-sabotage and what it can do to hinder us from achieving our goals in life.
Yeah, it's really interesting how the subconscious mind, I talk about this a little bit in some of my learning sessions with some of my clients, that where 91 to 2% of our waking thoughts and actions are really running a program that's really built into our subconscious.
Yes.
And most of these programs we've designed and fortified, so to speak, when we were young, and they were based on experiences and stuff. And sometimes they're hard to figure out. Like I didn't know. I remember and again, we've talked about this before, but I'll share this to everybody else. I had no idea. It's all the work I've done. I did not know that I had abandonment issues with my father, and until you mentioned it, and I didn't believe it when you said it.
Right.
But I got to thinking about it, and absolutely it feels like it, especially after what you said. I'm really, really, like I thanked you before, but this is one of those instances where I really, really, when I learn something new, I like to apply it to everything. So you said that just me having resistance to the topic, me not feeling neutral or neutral about this topic, because I was like, no, I've worked this out, I know what I'm doing, I don't have any fatherly issues, like I don't need a father.
No, thank you.
And I was like, and then after you mentioned this to me, and then I said, I got to thinking later, I got to think about this, because you were right. There's a resistance that I feel to it, and that was, and when I dug deeper, I thought, oh wow. It really wasn't, it felt like it was my grandfather, really, because he was really the father figure that I had. He was the first male image I had. So it was the loss of him in my life that still today grips me. Still today I feel it. Mm-hmm. I feel there's good ways and bad ways, but I didn't know. Right. I would have told you I was good. I would have told you, but yet, how do you?
It's insidious, really, how we walk through life, thinking that we're doing pretty well, and in many instances we are, but we don't really know that which we don't know. And the subconscious mind is running its programs through us, programs that we have developed since childhood. But coping mechanisms that we have developed, and they're running on auto, basically, and they're running our lives. And so unless we do inner work, we're really unable to see that blind spot that we all have.
It's sort of like looking through a set of colored visors.
Yes.
You're going to see the color that you're looking through. Like if I wore yellow pair of glasses, I'm going to see everything through a yellow hue.
Right.
And so therefore, we each see our life through our own visors that we have constructed ourselves. They're just not the color yellow necessarily. They're
right. And everybody else sees some of our blind spots but us, which is interesting. And then we say, well, you're crazy. That's not me.
Yeah, I'm better than that.
Yeah.
Because we all think we're sort of,
We all, there's natural bias that we have towards ourselves.
I'm wondering, I've always thought that was a good thing. See, I've always thought that there's good reasons why we should think highly of ourselves. We shouldn't delude ourselves,
Right.
but that's different. I think that we should, that we need a way to encourage ourselves and uplift our own
I
selves
believe that.
without being turning our back to some of the things that we need to work on.
Right.
Because you could easily go, like I did. I thought, I've worked through all that stuff. I don't have any issues with this.
Right.
And it didn't even seem strange to me that I hadn't cried since my grandmother's funeral at the age of 19 till the age of 45.
Oh,
Yeah, not a single tear.
that's right. You mentioned.
I was like, and it was because I had any kind of, and I think as I've looked at it today, I think it's because anything that would be traumatic to me, anything that would be, that it always has to do with the people I love in my life, my family, my brother, my mother, my grandfather, my partners. These things are very important to me. And so when I lose them, like my grandfather, for instance, it was such a deep loss that I remember going numb as a child at like 5. And that's the same, and when I look at it now, it's the same feeling that I would feel throughout those times when others would be mourning, and I wouldn't, because I'm like, I don't have any reason to mourn. That's what I would tell myself, because I just didn't. I didn't feel that way. But the reality, I think, is that I was fooling myself into, or I was covering up some of these
You
things.
were protecting yourself because at the age of 5, when this happened to you, you were emotionally unequipped to deal with the loss and the grief. So your subconscious mind took over, and it performed a soothing mechanism. It developed a soothing mechanism, and there seems to have been some dissociation there too, where you become a little numb because it's just too much for a little one to go through.
Yeah, I remember thinking my mother was lying to me. She's like, no, you're wrong. I remember thinking in my head, you're wrong. And I never thought my mother was wrong. My mother was like perfect until I was like 17.
I know.
It's like that's what I thought of my mother. My mother knew everything. She did everything right. So I always listened to her advice and things. But this one time, I remember at 5, I'm like, no, you're wrong about this. Grandpa loves me. He's not going to leave. He wouldn't do that to me. So that was a hard one.
Such profound memories, right?
Yeah, I could remember after he died. This is funny. After he died, I can remember going to bed every night, and I remember keeping in my mind the image of his hands, because he would have such big hands. He had big hands. He would grab me and tickle me and stuff. And I remember his face and his laugh. And I was always trying to make sure that I could recreate this over, and I can still do it today because I did it for like a couple of years. Every night I would go to bed and I would do this so that, because I didn't want to forget him. I said, I don't want to forget Grandpa. I don't want to forget Grandpa. I don't want to forget Grandpa.
So beautiful.
When
you express your love.
Yeah, it was just it was my way of holding on to the love that I had for my grandfather.
Right.
And I didn't really spend a lot of years with him. It was just from the ages of 0 to like 5.
But they're formative years.
Yeah, they're very important years. Because I didn't really have that, as I told you, I didn't have that contact with my biological father. He was out of the picture when I was barely 1.
Yeah.
You know.
But you did have a father figure in your grandfather.
In my grandfather, yes. Yeah. And he did, and he absolutely took that role. And my mother was proud because she loved my mother loved her mother, or her father. Very close to her father. They got along very, very well. All the lessons and all the things that she taught me growing up, she would say that her father taught her those things. And I remember one of the most touching things that my mother ever told me in my life was when I was about probably 13, and I was asking her about my father and her father and my grandfather, and she said, I'm really lucky that you boys were such good kids, that you are such good kids, because I wouldn't make it. I don't know if I'd be able to make it if I had to do all what my friends have to do with their children to make sure that they're in school and doing the things they need to be doing and homework and all this stuff. She said, you boys are really good. And then it was just, and then she said, sometimes when I get really sad, I don't know why this was in the same conversation. I think she was trying to tell me that we were helping her get through this. But when she was young, when we were young, she would say that she used to carry my father's, an old shirt of a dress shirt of my grandfather's and her father. And when she would have it, I remember seeing it in her top drawer. I couldn't figure out why she had one of Grandpa's shirts in her top drawer. But when she got sad, she's told me that she would open that drawer up and take that shirt out and just smell it, and it would remind her of her dad.
She loved him.
Yeah.
Oh, how beautiful.
So that I always used to think, oh man, I hope my daughter feels that way about me. But you've had some interesting experiences in your life. What brought you to tell people what you want to? What brought you to where you are today? Because I think your story will resonate with a lot of people.
Okay. Well, growing up, I was the type of child that I had a very unstable home life. My mom was an alcoholic from the time I was maybe 3, 4 years old until I was about 9.
Okay.
And during those years, she separated from my stepdad, and there was a lot of drama, a lot of fights. And one of the things that I took on unknowingly was I took on the role of the emotional little blanket for my mother, the emotional, the parent pleaser, the comforter, the appeaser, because my mom was a very volatile woman because she was in deep pain. You know, she made some really interesting decisions in her life that just kept her in a downward spiral of self-inflicted pain, poor decisions back to back. So she found herself very unhappy during that time when I was maybe 4 to 9.
Was that the time when you told me about? Was that the time that she was like doing all the TV stuff and all the?
No, that was before. That was in the 60s. She was in my mom was involved in television back in the early 60s. And
But this was after that?
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, when she decided to settle down and get married and all that. But
Because you're
then-
not that old. You're not more than 60s.
So what happened was, and interestingly enough, my mom quit drinking when she found meditation. So that I was 9 years old. So, but prior to that, she was a very unstable woman. I actually believe that she has what some of you may know as a borderline personality disorder.
Wow.
So she was very, very unstable, very volatile, unpredictable. So I always felt like I had to walk on eggshells around her. And so this is what happens to a lot of us parent pleasers. We develop a coping mechanism. Okay, so I'm going to forget about my needs and be my mommy's emotional support system.
Even if it means you're going to betray yourself.
Yeah, well, yeah. And as a child, you don't think you're betraying yourself because you don't really have a strong sense of identity to even recognize that you're doing that. So I did what a lot of children do, which is I need to do what I need to do in order to get love and appreciation and validation and food from my mother. This is what children actually, so I developed coping mechanisms to deal with that unstable dynamic between my mom.
And you also told me that you were heavy.
I was heavy. I was chubby around that time, but then when I came to the States, and I was obese.
Do you think that those issues with your mother, you resort to food as a way to cope as well?
To some degree, I've never considered myself to be an emotional eater, but I think there was a contributing factor. I think that I put on weight because of lack of activity, and also it was one of those things that it was just meant to be. I gained weight and I became actually obese when I came to the States because of the kind of food that we have here, the processed food. You know, those little prepackaged apple pies at the grocery stores.
All right. Those are good.
I used to pop them like candy.
Oh, is that right? Okay,
They
well,
were like
there you
700 calories each or something.
I'll bet you, this is just a side comment from me, Dan the Dad Coach, I'll bet you a lot of it has to do with high fructose corn syrup. That was a big problem because I'm positive you didn't get it in Peru.
Not much.
Yeah, because you were the first, when did you move from when you were 11 or 12? 13. So you lived from 0 to 13 in Peru, and then the rest of your time here in the United States.
Yeah.
So yeah, your food choices would be radically different. I imagine.
The processed food is what.
Yeah, they don't have that. We have like we're experts at processed food.
Yeah, and what they put in the processed food here is different than what Peru puts in theirs.
Most countries you can't use high fructose corn syrup. You can't use some of the artificial.
That explains why I got so big when I got to the States.
And one other thing, when you eat food, this is for anybody who eats things with high fructose corn syrup, it lights up your pleasure centers in your brain like nobody's business, more than cocaine, more than any of these other drugs. So it's people become very addicted to that, and they don't realize it. And that's one of the things.
That explains a lot.
Yeah, and our bodies don't really know how to handle that sugar very well. So what it does is it just stores it. It says, oh, boom, boom, store. And so you end up being a really, really effective storer, energy storer.
Oh yeah, that was perfect.
So what that means is your body increases its insulin production and increases its lipid formation and increases its appetite. So everything feeds itself. So you become this feeding, storing machine. And that's what most Americans usually kind of are. They are.
You just explained my adolescence.
Yeah. and as a child, I made it a point to do this with my child. So as a child, you don't know how to eat.
No.
You just eat. You're just going after what's pleasing. And you can't do that in life. Not always with the food that we eat, because there are foods that are very, very pleasing to us, but can be horrible for us in excess. We have to make, so the way I did parented was, in this case was, I just showed her what was good by me doing it. So my daughter grew up wanting to eat like broccoli and fucking and vegetables. And nowadays she'll say, she's a beef girl. Nowadays she'll say, Dad, can we have some steak and make sure I have some broccoli? I'm like, okay.
She's so sweet.
Yeah, I mean, we both enjoy our sweet stuff. We like donuts, like Sunday's donut day. So I just happened to buy donuts today, just as a sort of in memory of my daughter not being here.
Oh, that's sweet.
Yeah, we used to get donuts. That's just one of the treats we give ourselves. So when you came to the United States, how did that shape who do you think you'd be doing the same work today if you hadn't moved?
I don't think so.
Because we're all fucked up here.
Yeah, no. But there's something to be said about the United States as far as I think the experiences that I went through as a child, including that transition, that very painful and awkward transition from having come from Peru and adjusting to American culture, is part of the reason why I am who I am. So I cannot imagine myself being anybody else.
It's really interesting. I try to pride myself on recognizing accents and people both countries, but you were very, very hard for me to figure out.
Really?
Yeah, it's really interesting.
Because I do have an accent, but people.
It's very, very slight. It's not hard. It's not a hard accent, and you have very good diction, and you have a really good grasp of the English language. So you understand jokes, so it's not so it's so it's very different. So I didn't even know you were even. I just assumed you were born in the country here grew up somewhere here.
I think that my diction is the way it is because when I was very young, I began to become interested in reading about philosophy and
really? So I'm not the
philosophy.
only one.
No, I was obsessed with philosophy and psychology from the time I was 12. So
oh, wow.
and
Okay,
and I was in the 13 or so I was already in the United States, and so I only had access to books in English. So I had to force myself to understand philosophy in
that's
English.
difficult. I have a degree in philosophy.
Oh, it was.
And some of these authors who produce works, I know I had to do this work, and there's like, if you start doing work at the level that I was doing it at the graduate level, you start reading some of these doctoral theses of these different and there's only about 3 on average. This is when I was graduating from graduate school. There were only, on average, every year there was about 3 positions open a year in academia for philosophy PhDs, and a handful of philosophy PhD people that got these degrees, really, because there's nowhere you can go with it aside from teach.
Right.
So and there's like 3 jobs a year in the United States. 3. In all the universities, 3 usually on average. So it's not a lot,
Wow.
but when you read these dissertations, when you read this stuff, it's very, very difficult reading. It is not easy English reading. So I had to really slow my pace down because I loved it because there's so much to chew on. So when people read my writing today, I have to really dummy it down because I really want to speak a bit more esoterically, and it's not always easy to follow.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense.
It makes so I just I try to speak to my audience that I'm writing to, but I do still enjoy picking up like like Martin Buber, or like these are really wonderful theologians who Paul Tillich is one of my favorites.
Okay.
People like this, who I like to read. But I also like classical stuff. Like I usually try to include a quote on some of my meditations when I do it on social media every weekend. Usually, like I tend to favor some of my favorite authors, some of my favorite philosophers. But some of the oldest ones like Confucius and Lao Tzu, people don't realize that both these people, they're so venerated today as heroes, as people we look up to them for their wisdom. And in China, they're extremely looked up to, right? Well, in their time, they were run out of towns for the way they thought, the way they talked, because people didn't. It was just like what we were watching that show the other day, and just like when something new comes around, and and only a few people really understand what the hell they're talking about, then people get scared and they want to run you out. And that's what happened to Confucius on many occasions.
I believe that there are those in life that come with the calling of being a catalyst. And those
Yeah.
people, those trailblazers, those visionaries, they create waves that are very, very scary to most. And that's usually the pattern, you know. A catalyst comes in, a visionary, a trailblazer, a Jesus, Lao Tzu comes in, and it's like a collective punch in the face, right?
Right.
Yeah, and then it creates this wave that is very unsettling for the status quo. But it's almost like a seed gets planted, and then over time, the seed begins to germinate,
Yeah.
and then and then by that time, the man's been, or the woman has been, demonized and casted out, or whatever it may be. But we have a very interesting way of treating our visionaries.
Yeah, and I think it, to me, I read it as fear.
Yeah.
It's a lot of fear. It's just that we want to always be safe. We always want to be safe. So we know that what I'm doing now is pretty safe. It feels safe, even if it's not perfect. So when somebody new comes along with a new idea, maybe they're talking about getting rid of the idea of color,
Right.
or money, or you name it. You name the topic, and they're changing it in some way. Everybody gets scared, and then they want to kill him, or they want to run him off, or get him out of there.
I think it's a protective mechanism. Again, going back to the ways in which we navigate through life, we have these protective layers, and then fear is almost, the more intense and the more radical the change is, the more likely it is to be met with fear in the beginning.
And I think sometimes that happens within us too, right? Like we do that to ourselves. So for instance, I work with a lot of people, and this is one of the topics I wanted to talk about today, about staying consistent and driven and motivated on a plan, on a fitness program. Or for that case, anything that you want to do. So if you want to change your life in some way, you want to start working out, you want to start doing cardio, you want to start you want to start writing your book, or whatever it is that a person wants to do, you usually have to start a process that you haven't started before. You have to formulate a process, and you got to execute on that process on a daily basis. You can't do it every once in a while. It's got to be every day.
Yes.
That's why I believe meditation should be done daily. I believe that all writing should be done daily. If you're going to make it into, if it's going to be something significant. And when we start to try to do some of these things, I find that a lot of people, they have very difficult times changing those behaviors.
True.
They can do it for a couple of days, maybe even a week at a time. But then one thing happens, or something, and it's not these things that happen in their life, they're not unusual to their life. They're always going on. Time issues, work issues, children issues, family issues, all these things. That's just part of human life.
Right.
But they're more willing to use those as excuses to be able to go fold right back into the old behaviors that got them to the place that they don't want to be in the first place.
Right.
And yet they know it and they don't want to do it, yet they do it and they're frustrated. Mm-hmm. So because to me that's a betrayal of yourself.
Yes, it's the ultimate self-betrayal.
If you make a contract with yourself and say, I'm committed to doing this process, I'm going to follow through with this, then you willingly, you're breaking it. Nobody breaks their diet and not know it. I'm sorry. Everybody knows when you aren't following your process, you know it when you're breaking it. And so it's not a surprise. And so you have to be, you are the only person that is making that choice. And they're making the choice.
Yes.
Willingly.
Whether they know it or not, fully, consciously.
They all know these are actions. So they're very conscious of the actions they're doing. Sometimes they might, I've had people who would grab us when they're cooking for their family, they'll grab a little bite because they've done that habitually. And I'm not talking about that. That you can catch yourself. That you can do unconsciously. Go, oh, I shouldn't be doing that. It's the getting a meal or not doing your cardio or not working out.
I know what you mean.
Yeah, it's like those things. You got to make a choice to do those things,
Right.
and you got to make a choice to eat something off your plan. It takes more than just a bite. You recognize it right away, and you have to go through some effort. But they're choosing it, and they know they don't want to, but they do it anyways because it's easier, because it feels safer, because it feels ease. It doesn't, And I've always said you got to feel uncomfortable, but I think so. Talk to me about what you think is really going on behind the curtain sometimes, why they might be subverting their own desires.
Okay, so as human beings, we all have natural proclivities towards short-term versus long-term reward. It also has to do with the way that we were raised. if we were raised um, acknowledging short-term or long-term reward, and also our propensity towards being self-directed and self-aware. These are all things that we have, we lean either towards or against, right? So besides from that, though, what happens is growing up, we develop self-soothing mechanisms, and one of the self-soothing mechanisms that we develop is food or a short-term reward. And so what happens is we grow up constantly stuck in this, and this is most people, constantly stuck in this dynamic of avoiding pain and seeking pleasure. And most people operate under that
Is it
model.
because that pleasure feels safer than pain?
It's almost embedded also in our evolutionary path. I mean, as human beings, we have evolved to the point where we are today by avoiding pain. I mean, that's how we have survived physically, right? But it's almost like we're obsessed with seeking short-term pleasure and avoiding pain at all costs. Especially nowadays in this society that we live in, it's very, very self-gratifying. Okay, how can I get the most amount of pleasure right now? So long-term pleasure is not something that is commonly cultivated. So if you are one of those people, like the majority of us, who are obsessed with seeking short-term pleasure and avoiding pain or discomfort at all costs, no matter how rewarding it may be to go through that discomfort, that will be translated into a self-sabotaging behavior. You will be, it's like, okay, I gotta have that piece of pie. I know it's not good for me. I know I'm supposed to lose weight, but I can't help it. So, and they don't have enough.
They want to feel that.
That it becomes. It's also as a way to soothe yourself from anxiety. And so this is the way in which I tell my clients, this is what's important. You have to develop a practice and cultivate certain practices, certain behaviors every day to soothe yourself, to parent yourself, and to guide yourself through these possible self-sabotaging situations. So you have to cultivate certain practices.
What are some examples of some of those practices?
Okay, so definitely meditation, and it doesn't have to be for a very long time. It could be 15, 20 minutes a day, or once in the morning, once at night. Also journaling. I am an advocate of journaling after meditation. And there's some material that I have my clients read in regards to mindfulness. Not too long ago, I developed a 28-day challenge, and I posted it for free on my Facebook page, that it has to do with creating mindfulness to release anxiety. Because what happens is we're a very anxious culture, and so because of the anxiety that we feel constantly and the stimuli that is coming at us so rapidly from social media and all this, in the outside world, we feel very overwhelmed. And if we don't have positive coping mechanisms to soothe ourselves and to become more mindful, we will gravitate towards things that just give us that short-term pleasure fix.
I think some people are in like the business of doing that.
Yes, that's their thing, right? So it's
not that it's a bad thing necessarily, but I think if you ignore some of the long-term,
right. So it's in a nutshell, is developing a set of practical skills to become increasingly more aware about yourself as a human being, and about developing mindfulness and your underlying motivations for anything that you do, because most of us do A, B, or C, but are unaware of our underlying motivations. Yeah. And so, and it's a process, but in a nutshell is developing the skills each and every day.
I want to highlight that because it's interesting that we can come up with our own reasons why we think we're doing something when it's really not that.
Most likely it's not.
It's like, for instance, Well, maybe is there anything interesting that you've come up with in your travels? Just curious on because I'm in regards to that, in regards to just people making some interesting excuses for the reasons why they do things, when really it might be something much deeper.
Okay, well, I did have an older client who, yeah, she's a grandmother. Her children have departed the home, and she's feeling a little lonely.
Sure.
Yeah, and she's older. So she's always been a very controlling woman out of fear, but she rationalizes her controlling behavior by saying that's just how she shows her love because she worries. I worry because I care.
Right.
And it's that belief is so insidious, is so prevalent in her that she still has it because she's associated that love equals worrying about, and she drives herself insane. Yeah, trying to because she doesn't have a lot of things going on in her life.
I do a bit of what I call joint success coaching, which is very similar to some of the stuff we're talking about. It's really just helping people, give some people some practices to help them to walk through their life, de-stress. I call it joint success coaching because I don't believe you can have success or joy if you don't have some practices that you cultivate, so that you cultivate these things.
Yes.
And very similar to what you're talking about. I have a wonderful client. He's an awesome dude. But and I've had this before with other people too, but I have one particular fella in the past who I remember it wouldn't matter. He was a very successful person, very successful financially in the industry that he worked in. He had clients that he would take care of, and he's very good at what he does. But every time that he would have an interaction with one of them, and he said, man, he would even hate taking on new clients because he has this fear of letting people down. I'm like, and he does such a great job. He'll have a conversation with somebody, like a text, for instance, and if they don't respond back really quickly, in his mind he starts to race about, oh my God, maybe I made him upset, maybe there's something wrong, maybe I've done something wrong, maybe and he says, I'll worry about it until they message me back and tell me, everything's okay.
Yes.
And so he and I worked on that, and he'd gotten a bit better. But what do you see in that? Because I had a hard time. To me, it felt like he's been telling himself I feel like he had imposter syndrome, where he just simply didn't believe his own press, even though he's really quite good at what he does, very good at what he does, one of the best. But he just doesn't. At every corner, he's willing to doubt it. And I said, I thought it had a lot to do with his engagements with his parents, specifically his dad. And he did have a troubled youth, and he had challenges in his early adulthood, got into drugs and doing other things, and fixed himself all up, and he's all straight now. But he had to go through quite a bit to do all this, And now he carries his crystals with him everywhere he goes because it helps him feel centered and helps him focus himself.
It sounds like he might be ungrounded.
I think so, but I'm curious from your perspective, what do you hear in some of that?
Okay, well, I think the common denominator for a lot of the symptoms that as human beings we exhibit is rooted in a feeling of unworthiness.
Yeah.
So I think we all suffer from the same
degree.
bottom root.
Well, I think
cause.
that when I've analyzed the messages that we receive growing up and stuff, it sure feels like to me that life is telling me that I have to make myself worthy.
Right, and so from that we develop all kinds of stories because it's the only way we know how to survive. I mean, from the age of 0 to 7 or 8, that's when our primary core identity is developed. And so before, during those early formative years, we don't really have a sense of who we are. So we simply develop it out of the messages that we get from our, whoever raises us. And some of those messages we internalize in one way or another, and many of them are not the most positive. So they translate into "I'm not good enough."
Yeah.
And so we have all kinds of stories and coping mechanisms that we develop from that.
Yeah, it seems like worthiness is a big
It
one.
is big.
Worthiness of love, worthiness of success, worthiness of feeling good in life.
Yeah.
It's really interesting. It's really interesting.
A lot of times, many of us develop the belief, and this is subconscious. In many cases, it is subconscious that we have to bend over backwards to be worthy of receiving love.
Right.
And so from that, there's all kinds of ways that we manage to sabotage ourselves and betray ourselves and ruin our lives. Because really, we don't need to go through that. You are loved. You are worthy. Because why wouldn't you be? You exist. Why wouldn't you be?
Right.
I know it's if you. I mean.
But we do live in a culture, a world that really recognizes action, and so and I think it's a good thing. But I also think it's a little confusing because what we're led to believe is that what we do and what we have and what we accomplish is who we are.
Right.
And so therefore, if I don't have and do and accomplish all these great things that everybody else thinks is good, then I must not be worthy. I must not be good enough. I must not be the kind of person that I should be.
So it becomes like dangling a carrot in front of the donkey. The donkey's always going to chase that carrot, and it's never going to, because there's always going to be something else that it is made to feel that it has not achieved.
I just don't like the donkey feeling shitty while he's chasing the carrot.
Yeah, most people feel like shitty. Yeah,
you shouldn't feel like shit chasing your carrots. It's okay to chase carrots. I just don't think you should feel shitty while
but when
you're
it's dangling, and this feeling that once I achieve this, once I have this, once I am with this person, I am going to be happy. And that is a false premise.
Right.
And but the root cause is I am worthy only if I achieve and do this. So it's really tied into this feeling of not being.
So in the industry that I exist in, that's very that's sort of very, very prevalent and very, very, very on the surface. People, they want to get their pro cards, they want to win shows, and if they don't, they feel broken. And when they do, they feel victorious. And I get that. It's not true, but I can see how someone could feel that way, and I can see how someone could feel both ways. But it's really interesting. I've actually had many clients over the years who I've taken to shows, and we've won everything. And then we go to one show and they lose, and they're crushed.
Right. And there's nothing, I want to interject, there's nothing wrong with playing with the world of form and achieving goals and starting careers and making major life changes. There's nothing wrong inherently with that. It's part of our creative nature, right? To put ourselves through all these hurdles and achieve and accomplish. But just knowing that at the heart level, at a spiritual level, if that's what you believe, we are not what we achieve.
No.
And you cannot be anything that is temporary.
Yeah. Right. Well,
Because it's always changing. So who are you if you lose something that you achieve? So you're gone? It doesn't make sense, right?
It doesn't make sense. But we live in a world where people that's how we classify each other. We code, almost like we're codifying everything in these interesting sort of ways where in Asia it's very popular to have these caste systems and such. And it's really based on some things that that nobody can really help, like what you're born into, skin color, these kinds of things. Like you can't help that stuff. That stuff we don't choose. This is what we have. We get what we get. But so it's fascinating to me that we have this in us. I always try to track it back to what would make from an evolutionary standpoint would make this useful for us. Why should, and the only thing I can come up with is that the kinds of ways that we think about each other, to be able to immediately ascertain what kind of a person you are. Are you dangerous? Are you not dangerous? Is a very primal, instinctual thing that we need to have. But now that we live in civilized society, we don't really have quite a strong need anymore. I don't need to assess if you're going to be harmful to me. Not really. Not as much as I might have if we were cavemen and cavewomen, and I didn't know who you are or what you come from.
You have to make decisions quick.
And you got to make it on sight. Otherwise, you could die. You could be overwhelmed, and you could get your stuff taken, your food, your stuff you just hunted. Today we don't have those problems.
No.
Well, some of us don't. Most of us don't have those problems. But so I can understand where it kind of comes from. But that's the only thing I think of where it would make the stereotyping, if you want to, as a blanket term, would be functional.
I agree that it's almost like an aspect of us hasn't caught up with our evolution.
Oh, absolutely.
So we are always lagging behind as far as our awareness as a collective keeps expanding in many, many different ways. We are not our cave ancestors and ancestresses. However, the ways that our subconscious mind operates a lot of times in our bodies are still, they still show us the remnants of our evolution, where we've been. And because some of those quick, in the moment instincts kick in as an evolutionary response. And then we have this awareness in this environment that is very different from the environment of the past. Actually, it's almost completely removed from where we've been.
Yeah, we've. It's been. I know you find this too. I find human behavior really fascinating.
Oh, it's fascinating.
It's really fascinating, but which is why I like dealing with it. I like studying it, I like looking at it. But it all seems to me like most of people's problems, especially when it comes to feeling motivated or feeling excited about what they're doing, comes from the inner talk that they have, the inner dialogue.
Yes, that is one of the factors.
I've always been fortunate to have a strong inner dialogue, so one that's positive and one that uplifts me and one that I can soothe myself with. I didn't really recognize that until you pointed it out that this was something that was going on. But yeah, absolutely, I've done that since I was a kid. It's the reason why I could probably give or take anybody in the world. I can just turn my back and leave if I have to, if I feel like I was in the wrong situation.
Right.
And not feel.
Which is optimal.
Yeah. I mean, and not feel any remorse. I feel. But I remember there was one instance when I was a kid. I was like 12, and one of my friends was moving. Her name was Amy. She was a good friend of mine. She lived across the street from me, and her dad had gotten a new position. He was a police officer. He became a detective or something, and they were going to move across town because he was taking in another something. They were going to move to a different house. They were living in a trailer, and we were in a trailer park. I grew up that poor, but they were moving to a house, and she was crying that week. And I remember thinking, "Hey, Amy, what's wrong?" And she said, "Well, I'm moving next week." And I said, "I'm not going to see any of my friends. You guys are going to be gone. I'm going to have to make all new friends." And I thought, well, I'd be excited about that. I like making new friends, like meet some new people. She's like, "Yeah, but I'm not going to be able to see everyone. You guys are real." I'm like, "You can just call me." But to me, it was very bizarre. I was like, "Well, just call me."
That's unusual. Yeah.
I just thought, and I remember this was a theme. So like I had several friends over the years that would be upset because they were leaving their parents. They had to go because their parents got a different job or something. They had to move. And I remember them being upset, not for a long time, but just, for maybe a day or two. They would cry it out a little bit. And I thought, boy, that's kind of strange. Like, I used to think to myself, well, I'm glad I would not ever feel that way, because I can't ever see just because I'm moving and I don't see friends, family maybe.
That's unusual.
But not friends.
Because most children would.
Yeah, I don't, but it's
be more inclined to cry.
Well, I've always felt it was because I wasn't losing my best friend. My brother, he's still there. I grew up with this guy. We had shared the same room, shared the same bed sometimes.
That's probably why.
So I always had my buddy with me. He's always there. My best friend's always there. Whereas my friends, their buddies, not so much. They're leaving some of their friends.
And it's also a proclivity that you've always had towards just feeling good and
I have my moments.
Yeah.
And it is really quite strange to feel overwhelmed. I've only felt it once in my life after I moved to Arizona, and I was going through a lot of stuff, and I remember thinking all my stuff got delivered to my house in boxes, and I get stressed out when my stuff's not put away. So I'm sitting there almost in tears going, I can't believe I'm getting overwhelmed by all this. And I've moved before, but this was the first time I did it all on my own. Second time I did it. But it just felt really, really intense. And I'm like, oh man, I remember I had to stop and just repeat to myself, okay, Ted, one box at a time, man. One box, just start now, man. Just shut the fuck up and just go for it. And I did, and I got it all done in a day and a half. Because I have this weird thing about when I move, I gotta have everything. I can't go to bed in a house that's all disarray. I can't do this. I'm gonna at least get my bedroom put together, and then I'm gonna get my kitchen put together so I can at least cook and I can sleep. Now I got that, and my office. So I cook, eat, and sleep, and work. Now the rest of it goes, but I had it all done in like 36 hours or less. But it just wouldn't bother me. But I remember it was the first time in my life I felt like that. I was like, wow, this is what normal people feel like? I was like, this is what I was like.
The majority of people live in a constant state of anxiety.
Okay, that's unusual to me.
But that is the norm. You are the unusual one.
Oh yeah, well, it's sure.
But there's
a
perfectly good reason for it. You're here to inspire others. I believe that you're here to inspire others as to how to tap into their joy.
I hope hope so.
I think so.
I definitely, there's certain feelings that are very alien, although I recognize them when I feel them. Anxiety is the most.
Yeah.
Worry, I've worried, but it's always in little bits.
There's a genetic predisposition for feeling anxious.
Really? Well, I must
Yes.
not have that gene.
I have it. To the point where I developed a program based on anxiety release through
Oh.
meditation.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so, but it's fascinating because we are, we have all these layers to us. We have the genetic, the evolutionary programs that we've talked about as a species that keep running on auto, right? We have that. Then we also have, I believe in genetic proclivities that we inherit from our family lineage. Some of us are more anxious, some of us, and I think it's embedded in our DNA. And then on top of that, we have our upbringing. And on top of that, we have some other aspects because two siblings can experience the same thing growing up and have two completely different.
Oh, yeah. My brother had a good example. We're identical twins.
Right. So there is also an unknown, more mysterious aspect to why we process reality in the way that we do. And I just find that really fascinating.
It is. They always, they study twins for this reason, so that they can. So it's like, and my brother and I were studying when we were growing up. I remember I went to some psychologists, and my mother. It was really free babysitting for my mother. That's what she did it for. But they were really wonderful. It was really pretty cool. But I don't remember any of these sessions. We were quite young. But I know that my brother and I have had that exact many things because he's written. My brother's a pretty prolific writer. That's what he does. He's an English professor, and he's written many books on racism. That's his area of expertise, especially as it pertains to pedagogy and right assessment. So that's what he's applied it to, and of course he also is not a believer in grading systems. He believes in labor-based contracts instead of grading systems, and I agree with him 100%. It's always about the process and not about the end result. You use the end result. That's the consequence of your process. If you want a different end result, you change your process. Easy. But everybody wants the result to change, but they don't change their process. And to me, this is like defunct thinking. Like, how do you even come to this conclusion that you could actually get a different outcome if you're doing the same thinking the same shit? It's like you literally. So, and whenever we start to do and think differently than we normally do, what happens? We feel uncomfortable.
Right.
We feel anxious sometimes, probably. But most people just feel uncomfortable, and they do exactly what you said. They go right to the things that make them feel ease or comfort or safe.
Regardless of how logical, regardless of how dangerous they are.
That's and I butt up against
regardless of how self-destructive they are. Because and everybody has a different way of, it's a spectrum, right? But we all seek that short-term pleasure, and if we're not rooted within ourselves and we don't know how to soothe ourselves very well, we can go down this rabbit hole of self-destruction, and a lot of people do that,
unfortunately. Well, and I think I still believe that there's everything that happens to us is there to inform us and to help us in some way. Ultimately, yeah. I don't think that some things we don't necessarily have to experience to learn.
Right.
It's not, and some things, and some people do. I know people that I remember asking I had a girlfriend. And when I lived in Temecula many years ago, she used to help other ladies. She was a recovering alcoholic, and she used to help other ladies with alcoholism. And she would be a sponsor for them, right? And she would do all the meetings. And I went to a few meetings with her and helped her a little bit because I was interested, and I wanted to be supportive of her. And I remember asking her after we had been dating for maybe 2 years. And I remember I would see these ladies that she would work with, right? And she would, as a sponsor, you're responsible to give them their daily checklist. Like, this is what you get up, take a shower, because she said when these people come out of their addiction, they need someone to help them with everything, at least for the first little bit, to tell them exactly what to do. Hey, you gotta get up, let's take a shower, get your clothes on, let's get some breakfast, go work out, do whatever it is. And because they're totally lost, right? They're just like kids again. And I said, well, how come? I've watched you work with these ladies. How come they all relapse over and over and over again? I said, because I knew the stories. I talked to some of these people, and they had gone through all this trauma, all this heartache, all this. Life went down the tubes, and they're recovering. They're doing better. They're doing great. And next thing you know, it's like, I haven't seen her for a couple of weeks, and she's off on a bender, and she's drinking, and next thing you know, she's just loses everything. And I asked her, well, why do they do that? And she said, well, some people, this was her explanation, and it made sense to me, but I'd love to hear your 2 cents. She said, some people just have to hit rock bottom. They have to lose it all before they have any resources to want to be able to come back up. They have to, they're either going to die or they're going to come back. She said, so sometimes that's just, because to me, I'm logic driven, right? Like there's a part that's logic driven. Yes. I think this is logical. Okay, you know this other side, this other stuff is not working.
But it doesn't. Logic is not at the center of our of the way we operate in life. We're emotional beings first.
Yes.
And some of us are more logical than others, and which is really nice.
Yeah,
it goes along really well. But we're not primarily led by logic. Otherwise, I mean.
So how do we connect our logic to this feeling based? So we can merge the two and have and guide ourselves without moving to those places that can be destructive.
Okay, I think there's a deeper issue. Like, let's take the example of this lady that was struggling with addiction,
yes.
right? Okay, so
it was alcohol.
This lady, okay, so she had a relapse, and there is validity to the concept of reaching rock bottom. But let's go back to the subconscious mind. In the subconscious mind, we store the ways in which we try to get our needs met from childhood. So we develop, like we talked about, we develop coping mechanisms. So we have needs. We have physical needs and emotional needs. And as children, we recognize, okay, my need for recognition, my need for food and shelter are met this way, or my need for significance is met this way, my need for a contribution is met this way. And some of the ways that we learn to get our needs met are not healthy. Like, for instance, the child that learns that acting out is the only way to get recognition. Right. You develop, that's a very mild example, but that association of learning to misbehave as a means to get recognition or validation from the parents, it becomes a pathway in the subconscious. So it is unhealthy. So that person growing up develops a subconscious belief that the only way to get their needs met is through an unhealthy means of acting out and being destructive. Or yeah. So that is an example. Like, it has to do with self-awareness. Enough self-awareness to go down that path of self-reflection and get to know yourself, your core motivations. What drives you? What needs do you consider mostly important? Your need for love, connection. How do you, what are some of the coping mechanisms that you've developed to get your needs met? And are they healthy? So what happens is the goal is to recognize if some of these coping mechanisms are being dealt with in healthy or unhealthy ways, and if they are being met in unhealthy ways, how to soothe yourself or give to yourself some sort of outlet so that you can meet them in healthy ways. It's almost like you have to deprogram yourself and reprogram yourself, reparent yourself. Like the need for connection. If the only way that you feel like you can connect with somebody is through betraying yourself or denying yourself of self-dignity or putting yourself in harm's way, you will do some pretty stupid things for the sake of connection. Yeah. When in fact you can, with enough self-awareness and mindfulness and practice, you can deviate from that unhealthy situation and find better ways to cultivate a skill that will make you feel connected in a better way. So for whoever wants to transform their lives, it takes consistency and diligence and constant self-awareness and self-reflection and the tools. And they have to be practical, one thing.
I don't think most people are, I agree with you 100%. I find it fascinating, but I don't find many people who are really truly that aware, self-aware.
Right, but for those that are just aware enough,
and it's always the ones with all the problems that aren't aware.
Right. I think the degree of lack of awareness and self-reflection, you could see it because it's the bigger problems they have.
Right.
You can see it in their
Oh,
problems in the
easy.
way, yeah.
They can't.
They can't. But if there's
They think
enough,
it's the world's problem.
and you can't help those people, yeah, that can't see that they need help. But if there's enough, if there's a glimpse of awareness that something needs to change, that is enough. Because if they allow themselves to be coached, to be mentored by people that do the work that we do, for instance, it's enough for us to step in and create some tools that they can follow,
Sure.
that are practical, that are easy to follow. But it just takes a glimpse of self-awareness. Without that, there's really not much anybody could do.
Is there anything that you know of that can encourage self-awareness?
I think the most important thing is meditation. And meditation can come in different forms, but there is a simple way to meditate. There's guided meditations, and they don't have to be very complex. It's just focusing on the breathing or listening to some meditation music and doing a series of breathing exercises. The key with meditation is to become more aware of the thoughts that come and go, and that aspect of ourselves that is aware of the thoughts. So when you become aware of that difference, there's a peace that emerges. And so that peace brings about all kinds of changes eventually.
Peace as in peacefulness, or peace as in a part of something?
Peacefulness.
Okay.
There's a sense of serenity that comes.
Okay.
Because you're observing the chaos of your mind. And the goal is not to stop thought.
Yeah, you become like the third person observer.
Right.
You become
right.
like an audience.
Right. And because we're always going to be thinking during meditation, most of us, but the goal is not to empty your mind of thought, but to realize that all thought is empty.
Oh, I like that.
Yeah. And that it's okay if it's there, but that there's another aspect to you.
I try to tell people that it's okay to think stuff. It's just don't fixate on it. Don't respond to it. Don't interact with it.
And that the idea of killing the mind or killing the ego is absolutely ridiculous.
Well, it would be impossible for me to do that.
Yeah,
to my
it's
own self.
Taniba. It goes against our survival depends. We have a sense of identity for a reason, but it's just recognizing that there's an aspect of us that is much more powerful, much more serene, much more aware than just our crazy thoughts. Because our crazy thoughts are usually just programs running on auto. So it's just recognizing the difference between those two aspects of ourselves. The crazy thoughts, the recurring thoughts, and that other, I like to call it the sweet spot. There's a sweet spot in between the thoughts and the awareness, the witness of the thoughts. Because there's a serenity that comes up. And that serenity, that peace, that's where inspiration comes from. And then you start making decisions in a different way. You start actually seeing practical results in your daily life.
So when I meditate, and sometimes when we do our shamanic sessions, almost every time, actually every time we've done our shamanic sessions, this happens to me to some degree or another. But oftentimes when I meditate, I'll get to that place where I can observe, where I can authentically feel like I'm the observer and not the thinker of the thoughts, but I can observe. Does that make sense? And it feels like I lose my body a little bit.
Okay.
Like it feels like it's hard. It's such an interesting feeling. It's really, really addicting because it feels like I no longer am a part of this body, but I am. I know I am, but I don't feel like it. I feel like I'm detached, like I'm sort of detached from it, and it's like I can see myself almost.
Yes.
And I can feel. I can't quite feel everything. Once I start to go, what do I feel? Like my sensations, then I'll come right back to my body. But if I don't do that, I just allow myself to be in this place, this ethereal place. It's fascinating because those are the times when I see images. So like when we talked about some of our shamanic sessions where I see like the jaguar, or I see this. This is when I see it. This is when I see these things.
Right.
And as soon as I start thinking about it, boom, I'm right out. I'm right back out of it. So I really just have to not do anything. I have to just be an observer. I can't interact. I can't do anything. And it's a wonderfully liberating feeling. At the same time, it's also my human curiosity can't help it. I want to go into those places, but you can't. I'm only allowed to observe from my vantage point.
I see
Does that
what
make
you're
sense?
saying. Yeah.
Because I dispel it once I try to interact. Once I try to really analyze and interact, it's gone. It just goes.
Yeah. So in a nutshell, to answer your question, is just becoming more aware of that, those two different aspects of ourselves, our minds and our thoughts, and then the witness. And something happens over time when you cultivate that practice of just 10 to 15 minutes meditation, just getting into that
I'm
space.
still doing this, by the way.
Yeah, getting into that space and allowing for that natural serenity to arise. And from that, it seems boring, is not, joy yet, but it's the foundation, And so the more we do it, the more this gap is created between the crazy thoughts. And then you recognize these are kind of crazy thoughts. And then you start to question them. Are they really that? Are they telling me the truth? Because there's this other awareness that is blossoming. So over time, that translates into changes in your physical world. Your job, your relationships, your transformation, your bodybuilding, your diet, yeah. So that is the one thing. But there are many other processes and things that we could do to develop awareness and mindfulness and change our lives.
Yeah, whenever I take on a new athlete, for instance, I try to make it known, especially if they're an amateur and they want to make their way to the pro ranks. I talk to them about how this process is really an internal process, that the consequences are seen on the exterior. Now, I don't know if many of them really get what I'm saying. They all want to focus on the outside, and I get that. But the truth is that whenever we're looking at trying to change any aspect of ourselves, we have to start from within. It always starts from within, what we think about, what we believe, and then those things translate into actions. Because the only action in my mind that's ever worth anything is inspired action. There's no other action that's worth it. It's not worth it for me to go spend all this energy to try to make something happen when I clearly can't really do it all on my own. There's too many moving parts in life for me to even think that I can control me getting to my car and to the store and back. I have to literally have faith that I can do it.
Right. And that's another aspect of trust. And trust, whatever your spiritual beliefs are, whatever your religious beliefs are, understanding that there's an aspect of us that is connected to a higher intelligence. However, even you can see it in nature. Nature is extremely wise. There are so many things happening around in nature that are just cyclical and that are perfect. The seasons change, how the animals change over time, the way that our body functions in so many
amazing,
wonderful ways, without our conscious knowledge. So that is proof in and of itself that there is an organizing principle that knows much more than what we do. Just trusting in that.
Yeah, I've always been intrigued with stories of faith, to be honest. The first stories I gravitated towards, because somewhere deep down inside as a child, and then as an adult, I know that there's too much for this life for me to really understand. I can't really know it all. And I don't think I'm expected to. But faith kind of covers the gap. So I don't have to know how my car starts for me to get in my car and have it work. I can just turn it on.
Right. And have you always felt that way?
Yes, I've always felt that way.
So there's a correlation between those of us that are more prone to feeling anxious and a lack of trust. Because
That makes
so
sense.
when you trust in whatever that is, the organizing principle of nature, God, Muhammad, whatever you want to call it, right? The Buddha, source, whatever it may be, the more you let go of the how things are gonna pan out, the more you rest in that inner serenity. But anxiety is actually just a mental program that says I have to figure out because my life depends on it. I have to figure this out. I have to know the unknowable and control the uncontrollable. And we can torture ourselves, but that's basically what we try to do, because the mind can only see so far. It's a program. It's a built-in software where that is just it's equipped with understanding how to navigate through life only based on what it's experienced before. It cannot see beyond itself, and we only see 5%, and we experience 5% of what is actually out there. So the physical mind does a great job for what it's meant to do, but it cannot predict, it cannot give us inspiration, higher inspiration. That comes from somewhere else.
Yeah.
I truly believe that.
I believe that too.
And there's a say that talks about the mind. The mind is a great servant, but a poor master.
I like that. It's just true. I think we try to make our minds our masters because we really rely on science and logic and all these things to tell us how. So science and logic can explain some of the ways in which the world operates, but doesn't explain the meaning of it. And there's a big, and to me, that's the part that I'm most interested in. I don't know. I don't need to know how my car works, but but it has a particular function in my life that it serves that's important. And that's the part that I need to understand. That, like I gotta get to the gym, I gotta get to the store, I gotta get places. It's critical. These things are important in my life. So the meaning of the car really is more had to do with that, and less than me having to do with how it all works. How does that make it do that? Well, I don't know how it does that.
I can tell you from personal experiences that during those instances where I made the conscious choice to surrender to this higher principle and allow for things to unfold without me knowing how and without me trying to control every single aspect of a situation, it's almost like magic happens.
I believe that. I believe words are magical. I believe we are magical in the way that I see it.
Outcomes happen that the mind would have never come up with.
Right. This is what I find fascinating, that we can logically know that there is an infinite amount of responses, an infinite amount of experiences, this universe is infinite in all directions. And yet we think that we can, somehow, we think we know that certain things will or will not happen. For instance, if I said, hey, I'm going to I remember this as growing up. Now, I ended up not pursuing this. I ended up retiring, but I said, I'm going to be Mr. Olympia. I'm going to be a pro biathlete. I'm going to be Mr. Olympia. And of course, all my friends, they didn't really believe me because they couldn't see it themselves. They couldn't see how I could do this. And I couldn't see it either. But for whatever reason, I knew that I could. I knew that I just have to have faith. These other people could do it. I can do it. I don't need to know all the ins and outs just yet. I'll learn it along the way. Now, I've always held that perspective on a lot of things because I know that I just can't know it all. And so it's ludicrous for me to think like I could earn $112 million this year, but I won't if I don't believe it. And I was certainly, and most of that has to do with me not be able to see the opportunities, me not being open to the opportunities, me not being open to that part of my life that can serve me in that way. Instead, me trying to think, well, how am I going to? Because the first thing people say is, well, how are you going to do that? Well, I don't know how I'm going to do that. I couldn't have told you I was going to be a diet coach when I was like 20 years old either.
So a much more anxious and self-doubting person would have tricked themselves into paralysis in your case and would have never started. Right, because they don't have a perfect picture of what the end goal would look like. So therefore
So before we end today, let everybody know how to get a hold of you, what kinds of services that you kind of offer right now. And I think you and we're in conversation right now of putting together a collaborative package to offer. But I wasn't really sure if we were going to if I wanted to talk about today or not because we're still sort of formulating it. But I feel like it sort of dovetails nicely because I want to. Some of the work that you do is really, really, really relevant to the kinds of things that people are going through, at least through a fitness journey, or even just a regular person who wants to just feel and be better, feel great, have a transformed body, but in order to do that, you have to transform the inner person. And so this is highly relevant to those processes. I do some of this with my people, but you're so much better at it.
Thank you.
So tell people a little bit about where they can reach you and where they can find you if they want to learn more about you.
Okay, well, my website is under construction right now, but I created the Sedona Shamanic Group page, but I'm making some changes. So they can reach me at Instagram. I'm a Sedona Shamanic Group or Caroline Horning, and they can reach me through that.
I know you're on Facebook?
On Facebook as well, Caroline Horning.
Okay. Cool.
Yeah. that
And your
is
picture
nice.
looks just like you, so
What?
your picture looks just
Oh,
like you.
really? Okay, so I'm not catfishing.
No. I mean, like some people don't look like they do when you see them on videos, and then you see
That's
that, and then
true.
they show pictures of who. And they're like, you don't look like that, man. I'm like, well, I don't know what's going on.
That is true.
But you look just like your pictures.
Oh, okay.
Actually, you look better in person than you do in your pictures.
Oh, okay, great. Well,
So-
thank you.
So Instagram is it your name?
Yeah, Caroline Horning. Yeah,
Okay.
HORNING.
And then Facebook's the same thing.
Facebook the same. Yeah.
All right, cool. So then I'll have you. I'll have you on as a regular.
Okay, that would
do
be
yeah,
great.
Yeah, you'll come on. We'll talk about these same kinds of things. In fact, we'll continue to talk about some of the work that we're doing with me. I always think to use myself as an example because I'm shameless, so I don't have any ego
Yeah, you're
about.
pretty open.
Yeah, I don't care what people learn about me. It doesn't matter to me whatsoever. In fact, if it'll help somebody, then I'm happy to do it. Like I bare my soul on. I think one of the greatest things the internet has brought is for me to be able to connect deeply with other people that I don't even know, and I do it through honesty and through authenticness. Whenever I put out something that talks about things honestly, and I try to do that every time I write, because I can't always say good things. I don't always feel good things.
Right.
So it's amazing. Those are the posts that get the most action. Those are the ones that people email me. They say, "Oh man, I read your stuff. I really want to thank you for being brave enough to be out there." Hey man, it's not bravery. I tell them, this is just who I am. I said we all have this superpower. So I love talking about myself about this stuff because it helps me.
Right. I look forward to
Yeah,
more of these.
All right, well, another good episode. This was a little shorter. Some of my episodes go a little longer, but and we'll have you on again, okay?
Yes.
All right,
Thank
so
you
everybody,
much.
thanks again, and we'll
Thank
see you
you.
later.